Good day, good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 59, which, unless I get a couple of guests, might be the shortest one. We never know, but we'll see. As usual, I'm going to start us off with a tune, and yeah. Okay, that was the Maple Leaf Forever, and obviously I'm playing that in solidarity with the truckers and their supporters in Canada who are facing Trudeau's authoritarian left-wing state. So there we go. Excuse me 1 second, guys. I've just got to cool down. Yeah, so that was one subject I wanted to talk about today. I did try and get a couple of our Canadians to come on, but it's a bit of an awkward time, I do believe, for Canadians, although if you're listening to the stream, the two on my Discord, you both have the stream link in your DMs. I did my usual thing of going around the Bias Brainwashing Corporation. There we go. Change that name, mate, please.
Right. 1 second.
Thank you. Yeah, I did my usual thing of going around the Bias Brainwashing Corporation before the stream. And needless to say, the stuff about the truckers and the state of emergency and martial law and freezing private citizens' bank accounts and all this kind of stuff is buried deeply away within the BBC, while, of course, there's screaming headlines about what's not happening in Ukraine. And big headlines also about Afghan women who won't shut up. You know, I mean, I don't know why women not shutting up is a headline personally, but there we go. So, I beg your pardon. But yeah, there's nothing about that. And also there were more grooming gang people sentenced in UK a couple of days ago. It's still going on. And obviously the mainstream media reports it as little as they can, and as usual, it's all Muslim name people. So yeah. What's Nemo saying in the chat here? He's saying, told you the trucker stuff is already backfiring. They'll be begging for welfare soon. Tulsa Robotics is going to wipe out a lot of folks. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, Nemo. And I don't think it's going to happen in the short term anyway. I'm much more concerned with, as I say, Justin Trudeau in Canada has introduced martial law and he's introduced a state of emergency when there is no state of emergency in Canada at all, as many Canadians have pointed out. And he's using police in full riot gear to attack the truckers. He's freezing private bank accounts. And the banks and the government are cooperating to freeze people's private bank accounts. I mean, if that isn't 1984, I don't know what is, to be honest.
Yeah.
How are you going there, mate? Are you going to change that bloody thing or not?
Yeah, I changed my name. It's no longer.
Okay, fine. No, fair enough. Yeah, all right, fair enough. How you
It's,
how you going, Napoleon, man of many names?
I'm doing fine. Is my mic okay? Is it too loud, too quiet?
No, it sounds fine to me.
Alright,
Did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up?
oh shit! I was supposed. Oh well, I know it's because it's fairly short notice. So but I can head off and have a look at BBC News and see what's going on here.
Yeah, you'll probably see pretty much the same as me, but with a slightly more Scottish angle.
So, Storm Eunice carves a deadly trail across Europe. Don't know what the fuck that is.
Big wins.
Super League Huddersfield Brown people win 26-12 to Hull KR. Nice. Some shit that I honestly I don't understand how these people make money. These stories are so fucking boring. Shark attack victim was a wonderful human being.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, thank you for that.
I believe he was the first person to die from a shark attack in Sydney Harbour in 60 years.
Fuck me.
Obviously should be a world-breaking headline.
Yes. Oh, and it was reported in Cornwall. That's great. That's great. Ukrainian rebels mobilize as fighting escalates. I need an update on this situation. Ukrainian war, Wikipedia.
Yeah, I wouldn't check Wikipedia if I were you, mate. It's very lefty. But no, there's not really very much happening at all. It's just the mainstream media banging on war drums, which they've been doing for weeks now. For something we can't do anything about anyway. I mean, the British Armed Forces are far too weak to get involved in a war with Russia. Thank you very much. Even if I thought it was a good idea, which I don't.
Well, there's still I'm pretty sure there's still a war in their capital. No, not the capital. In one of the regions. Hold on, let me. It's still a stalemate. The war in I can't say it because.
You've gone, mate. Hopefully he'll be back. From what I can see, there he is. From what I can see, Napoleon, the only fighting going on there is between local Russians, because there's a lot of Russians who actually live in Ukraine.
Oh yeah.
In parts of it anyway, and Ukrainians. There's no Russian invasion or whatever they're talking about. It hasn't happened.
Saw a picture of a black cop's boot stomping on a white protester on Telegram. Based.
No great surprise, eh? Not a great surprise. I mean, look, Trudeau. I mean, one of the things that's niggling me a little bit about this Canadian situation is that people keep describing Trudeau as literally Hitler, because, of course, everyone we don't like is literally Hitler, when actually he is behaving like a typical communist, socialist, Stalinist type person. This is the situation. This is what he's really behaving like, in freezing bank accounts and using riot police against peaceful protesters.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've watched some of the films from the Canadian protests. They are not exactly thugs. Like many of the Canadian protesters are women and children, for God's sake, who are just out there supporting the truckers.
Yeah, I saw some memes about it, but other than that, no, I've never seen any of the riots.
There haven't been any riots. They haven't.
Oh, sorry, not riots, protests.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching some of the film of it. You can find various Canadian channels on YouTube that put it up from time to time, because the mainstream media certainly doesn't cover it, I can tell you. And a Dosastic Draco in the chat says, I like the meme where Hitler says, stop comparing me to Fidel Trudeau.
That's quite funny.
Because, of course, for anyone who doesn't know, Justin Trudeau's mother was notoriously loose as they used to call women who behave like sluts. And sluts. And there has long been a very strong rumor that he's actually Fidel Castro's child, shall we say.
Oh.
So there.
Bloody hell. His father was the Prime Minister of Canada. I didn't know that.
No, he absolutely was. But there is, as I say, there's long been. Good day, George. How are you going, mate?
Hello, fellas. I'm not too bad. I haven't been watching the rest of the stream, so just fill me in briefly about.
We're just talking briefly. I mean, we're going to cover it in a bit more detail in a bit, but we're just talking briefly about the Canadian trucker protests. And more importantly, Trudeau's declaration of martial law and a state of emergency and freezing private bank accounts, for God's sake.
All right. I know next to nothing about the Canadian trucker issue. I know it's something to do with vaccines, and that's about it. So,
well, they're really protesting against vaccine mandates. Making people get the vax.
Well, yeah, I mean that's basically the same as protesting the vaccine at this point, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and they're also it's because they're trying to stop people working, for God's sake, if they haven't been triple vaxxed or whatever the nonsense is this week, which will change next week, as we have all been seeing. But one thing that one of the British commentators about this said that I thought was very true and that should worry us all is that you're not hearing any senior political figures around the world condemning Trudeau in the least degree. No one's in freezing private bank accounts, for God's sake. No one has said, no, you shouldn't really do that, mate. Because, there's no real state of emergency in Canada. It's utter nonsense. And I know the Canadian Civil Liberties Union is actually taking the Liberal government in Canada to court over it. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, that's insane. I can't. Yeah, that has to violate. I mean, I have no idea what the Canadian Constitution is like, but that must be violating several.
Well, I'm 99% sure that it does, because why else would they go to court over it if they haven't already? If they don't already have a case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can go to court simply to make it be a nuisance. That's what they do in America, but yeah, that's insane. I had no idea that this story was a thing.
Halloween. Shalom.
Oh well, I mean, I suppose it is the next step of things, because we already know that the government freezes certain bank accounts in the UK.
Of course they do.
Yeah, I mean,
and they've been making the excuse, like they've been doing that to criminals, for example, for a long time now.
Yeah.
And now they're just extending it to anyone who doesn't agree with government policy.
I mean, it's a very curious thing to do, though, because it's like, what do you intend? Do you want them to take more money from the government now because they don't have access to their own finances or something like that?
Exactly.
Maybe, yeah.
Did you have a first subject to bring up, George, tonight for anything from your own point of view?
Oh, crikey. There's not all too much. Was there anything that was bumbling around my head? No, not really. I'm sure if there's been something that's been on my mind, it'll come up.
Well, the Scottish one I thought you guys might come up with, given both my guests this evening are Scots, is that the Scottish government have decided they're no longer even going to release figures about the virus.
Yeah, I saw
that. They're not even going to release the figures about who's died from what or when, because they say it will be used by anti-vaxxers.
I mean, the S&P are the kings of information control.
Oh yeah,
they absolutely love it. So that doesn't surprise me in a bit, because these are the same people who have passed a law which allows you to be thrown into jail because you said something offensive over the dinner table, not in public, the dinner table.
So your kids could report you in theory.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. that's now a law.
It's a bit like East Germany or Russia and Stalin's era, isn't it?
Yeah, it's yeah. So that was a speech law that was passed, I think, last year. So you know, it wouldn't surprise me if the S&P would do that. But
Yeah, no, there was several videos made about it yesterday. I think that the SNP, whoever runs the health up there, was saying, yeah, we're not going to release any more figures about this because it just gets used by anti-vaxxers for disinformation. And of course, you know, if the figures are as shocking as much of the mainstream media would want us to believe, then how could they use them that way? You know, and of course that also means that it's going to be almost impossible in Scotland to find out how many people have died from the vaccine, for example, from adverse reactions and so on. Although it was pointed out that if someone wanted to really find out, they could do a freedom of information request in UK, and that would actually overcome what the Scottish government is saying. It's just that the figures are not going to be released easily into the Scottish newspapers, etc.
Yeah, that's it's pretty bad.
I like I said, I mean, I think it relates very much to the Strucker thing, which is obviously one of the main stories at the moment, and that's you know, we're increasingly living in a dystopian world. You know, 1984 actually coming true. I mean, who would have said 2 years ago that a country like Canada, which has always been seen as a liberal country with a small L, would freeze private individuals' bank accounts? Who on earth would have seen that coming? And not one senior political figure around the world has criticised it, because they all want to keep that in their own back pockets, of course.
Yeah, but this is a very yeah. I mean, I think the thing that's getting me is like, I mean, we all saw this coming, and the government have been growing their power since 2001 in how might we say, not illiberal, well, I suppose it is illiberal way. I mean, if we're valuing the integrity of individual freedoms, I suppose that is in some way liberal policy. But this it seems that at some point between 2020 and 2021, something just it went from 0 to 100. Just absurdly quickly, but yet also quietly as well. I don't know. Like I would have never, I would have never thought of freezing bank accounts being done as a government policy for free expression even a week ago. I thought that they wouldn't do that. That's incredible.
Yeah, no, he's declared a state of emergency, martial law. The only reason he's not using the Canadian Army is the Canadian military said they wouldn't do it, basically.
Is it martial law necessarily using the army?
No, you don't have to use the army, but I mean, it basically means you can. But the leadership of the Canadian Army said, no, we don't want to get involved in this. Quite rightly, because I dare say a lot of their guys wouldn't want to do it. But he is using police in full riot gear and, armored vehicles and all the usual stuff. And as I said, anyone who's been watching these protests, they're entirely peaceful. And the truckers are being supported by huge numbers of women and children who are dancing around waving Canadian flags. It is not some sort of fascist process, which is what Trudeau has been trying to pretend.
Yeah, I mean, what did we just have the Canadian election just passed?
Yeah, not too long ago.
Yeah,
and it didn't change anything. Basically, both parties ended up where they started.
Yeah, so it doesn't surprise me actually that he'd be doing this, because he's thinking, look, okay, I'm in power. I've got a long time ahead of me to clear up this mess. I have a long time ahead of me to import more voters. Why don't we? Why don't I just try and enforce some control while I'm at it? So
a lot of Canadians seem to think that Trudeau is finished, whatever happens now.
Here's the thing: political controversies that happen this early on are pretty immaterial to to an election. At least I would say. Um, I think if this happened before the election, I don't think he would have even considered freezing bank accounts. So I wouldn't think he probably wouldn't have even considered
I think the Canadian election was probably getting on for a year ago now, I should say.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, that was why.
And I'm not sure if Canadian election cycles are 4 years or 5 years. So I don't know. He might not have quite as much time as all that. And also, don't forget, if I was the Canadian Liberal Party, God forbid, because they're the left-wing party in Canada, obviously, I would want to replace him well before the election myself.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been prime minister for a long time now, and I think probably people are getting sick of his black face. That's a joke, by the way, because he's constantly has photographs of him appearing in blackface at various things.
So the 45th election is going to be held in October 2025. So, by the looks of it, he's got a long time.
So he's got about 3 years. Yeah, he's got about 3 years.
Yeah.
If they wanted to replace him, which I'm absolutely sure they will want to. I mean, a couple of things have happened that have been on the side of the protesters. For example, the leadership of the Canadian Conservative Party has changed. Yeah, they got rid of the guy who nobody liked because he was a very left-wing conservative. So they did get rid of him. That's a plus. And a lot of the more based Canadian provinces, like in the Midwest of Canada, in the prairie areas, those guys have got rid of a lot of this vaccine nonsense already.
Okay, so this is absolutely fascinating. So I just dug up the polls right now.
Yeah.
And so on the 8th, which is 10 days ago, slightly more, it was 30-33 going to the Liberal Party. And now, and on the 11th, it was 31-30, favoring the Conservatives slightly. It is now 38.7, 30.6. So that's a change from a 3% lead to the Liberals to an 8% lead to the Conservatives within a span of less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's astounding.
And bear in mind, that's with all of the mainstream media in Canada on Trudeau's side.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was also hearing quite good things about the People's Party of Canada, but it seems like they're not doing so well, actually. And then of course he got, I mean, Bloc Québécois has seemed to have given votes to the Conservatives, if I'm looking at this correctly. But yeah, so there's all to play for, it seems.
And I mean, also one of the things people outside of Canada, like as I said, the Midwest kind of prairie provinces of Canada are still pretty rural and pretty based. But Toronto and the East Coast is where all of the immigrants arrive and tend to stay, and that's the left-wing area. You know, it would be a bit like in the UK, looking at the difference between London and the north of England, for example.
Yeah.
Or between Glasgow in Scotland and the Highlands.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That is actually one of the things that favors constituency voting. Is that basically all the Labour voters are in one area. That's like, so you always get the biggest margin, the biggest seat margins go to them. But right-wing seats typically have broader sway, and they typically have more access to swing seats and things like that. But the thing that I've never heard mentioned is that one of the truckers demands to stop that digital passport nonsense. I feel like that is the most important part of this.
I mean, what they were doing, George, is that apparently, like truckers who were traveling from the United States Canadian truckers who were traveling from the United States to bring in stuff to Canada, because obviously Canada imports quite a lot of stuff from the US. They wanted to stop them being able to do that without being vaxxed triple 4 times or whatever the bloody nonsense is this week. And they were going to give them these digital passport things. Well, I think that was the thing that originally set it off, because it was going to stop people who weren't vaxxed from working, basically.
Yeah. I can recall. I mean, do we know if Canadians are triple vaxxed or quadruple vaxxed or whatever?
I think they're one of the most vaxxed places because they've gone along the same lines as Australia has. But on the other hand, Australia is now starting to drop this stuff. Even in the vile state I live in Victoria, like, it's not a vile state, but it's got a vile leader in dictator Dan Andrews, the Labour Party leader in Victoria. And even he's having to get rid of a lot of the regulations now, because outside of Canada, most of this China virus stuff is starting to fall apart.
Yeah. They seem to actually have they seem to have 2 vax policy. I mean, the UK is, I think it's 4 or something like that now.
I have no idea.
3
I don't follow it. I've never had one, so I don't follow it.
Yeah. But no, Canada seems to be only 2. No, I mean, I wish the truckers well. I genuinely do, and I wish Canada gets its skates on with everything that's happening in the world. But it doesn't look good. I have to be real about Canada. It doesn't look good.
Well, look, the vast amount of immigration. I mean, proportionately, because their population is smaller, like Canada's got even more immigration than UK at the moment.
Yeah, and even the UK has even illicitly attempted to vote for populist right-wing candidates. The Canadians have never done that. They have some pretty, like, even their conservatives are the sort of David Cameron style conservatives over there, and like their People's Party, which appears to be the good one. Apparently, it's got quite a lot of support in the youth, which is not true of British right-wing votes. They don't seem to be doing very well, so it's a bit depressing. It has to be said.
Just for the chat's information, George here is our kind of statistics guy in many respects. So,
yeah, well, to an extent.
But yeah, someone, Brian Borrow in the chat said Trudeau has the women's and soy vote. Yeah, particularly the women's vote. I mean, he was a substitute drama teacher and a part-time ski instructor. They are the only jobs he has had apart from being Prime Minister of Canada. It's just, crazy, really. Devonian in the chat is saying in UK it's 3 jabs, not 4.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a look at that.
Maybe it's 4 in Scotland and 3 in England. That wouldn't surprise me, because I know Scotland and even Wales have been going a bit overboard, just to prove that they're different.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't seem that there's a lot of data on how different demographics vote in Canadian elections. I suspect they probably don't have people, like, it's possibly too hard for them to collect data on that because it's so spread out. I mean, in the UK, it's all things considered, it's pretty much what you expect, but it seems to be that Canada might be a bit more. They don't publish their figures. I mean, it happened. I mean, does happen, to be fair, in quite a lot of places. You get a lot of people who basically will refuse to tell you how different demographics voted and things like that. I think they do it to basically give you the idea that it's the will of the people innocuously, as opposed to giving you any information. But
well, isn't there a push in UK that the census data is not going to be released in a lump? It's going to be like dribs and drabs of information coming out. That to me is deeply suspicious.
Yeah, and the thing we all want to know, which I will not say explicitly, is probably not going to be either A, not going to be released, or B, going to be released very quietly. And no one you will not because I remember back in 2011. I mean, I was still a bit of a burn, but people were still talking about the pretty famous change from something like 89% native to 82%. 82% is just insane. It'll probably now be something like 75 or 74.
Well, I still see people saying 83% in videos and so on.
Fib.
Yeah, I know it is. I mean, I don't think it will be 75, but I'm pretty sure it'll be 78, 79 for sure.
Yeah.
And can you believe them anyway? I mean, everyone I have spoken to who is intelligent and reasonable, and I'm talking about everyone from people like not people I've spoken to, people I've watched, everyone from Nigel Farage, etc., to people who are more to the right of Nigel, have pointed out that there are between 1 and 2 million illegal immigrants in the UK anyway.
Yeah.
Which are not counted in any of those figures.
And which, as you would say, Alexander Johnson wants to grant amnesty to.
Yeah. Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
For those before, even before the election, he said he was considering doing that. He would vote in favour of a policy like that. It's kind of amazing that he hasn't already done it.
and this is the same Conservative government which also quietly has said that for the next 10 years it wants 700,000 immigrants a year into UK.
Yeah,
700,000 per year.
It's more than
it's insane.
It's more than 1% per year.
Yeah, it's just insane. It's ridiculous. And obviously, I mean, in the UK's case, I mean, at least if you're Canada, you can say, oh, well, we've got plenty of space. But in the UK's case, parts of England are more overcrowded than many parts of India. It's absolute insanity. And then they'll go on about, oh, yeah, young Anglo-Celtic couples can't afford a house. Well, what a bloody surprise.
Yeah, and then you'll see posters in the street saying, don't have kids. The audacity.
Yeah, yep. Mustn't have kids if you're a white guy. That's basically all it is. If you're a white guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I was chatting on a Discord I'm a member of last week, and we were talking about there's an enormous push in academia to stop Anglo-Saxon being used as a term in academic historical studies.
Yeah, that's actually a thing.
Yeah, I noticed. Yeah,
I have a friend of mine who's studying. He's doing a history degree, and a part of his dissertation is religious history in pre-Norman England, and he can't use the term Anglo-Saxon. He's been advised by his supervisor, don't use it.
But that was pushed entirely by the usual suspects. The people pushing it were feminist activists, left-wingers, who are basically racist anti-white people. They are entirely the people pushing it. Like, I've watched a couple of videos on this that you can find on YouTube. And, people like Tolkien, for example, who is in the news at the moment because they're trying to bastardize his reign on Amazon. Tolkien was a professor of Anglo-Saxon.
I mean, what you could say is that it's not reasonable to identify the Angles and Saxons as not a homogenous group, and I have seen it said, it's exclusive towards the Jutes, which I mean, one of the primary reasons
pathetic. They were the smallest of the three groups.
One of the primary reasons no one talks about the Jutes is because we have no real documents about them. Yes. No one really knows what happens. We don't even know where they lived. Some people have guessed Denmark, but we don't really know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, also all of the people tried. There were people talking about a DNA study recently, one study, which, because it was being pushed by the mainstream media, I'm always, as soon as one study comes up and it's being pushed by the MSM, people like the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, etc., it will always and inevitably be basically anti-white British. That's the only reason they'll ever push anything.
Well, I mean, one of the things I have an idea that it might be about is they're doing it. They basically misread the study. Normally, these studies are really, really anodyne, and what they're doing is they're basically trying to trace certain genomes, and they're basically splitting things apart and all this pretty simple stuff. But you don't that normally you always get like these journalists, they read the fucking abstract or something really stupid and they'll go, oh well, I think this is what this says, with a degree in, like, I don't know, journalism, and then they go write about it, and then everyone else doesn't read the study. They instead read what the journalist wrote about it, and then you get like 3 articles later and you get some fucking absolute bullshit that's got nothing to do with it, like Chinese whispers.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I mean, I believe this study was trying to say, oh no, not that many Anglo-Saxons really arrived. Whereas all of the historical evidence we have, and we do have writing from that period. I mean, one of the things that happened is because the Romans left, and Latin pretty much died out as a spoken language in the UK, or in England anyway. Because that largely died out after the Romans left, and quite quickly because it wasn't very deep into the society. English is probably the first, or is the first, European native language which has a written language, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
We have a literature.
Could you tell me what they were exactly saying so I can go have a look?
I was getting this third hand because there was this enormous row going on in the Discord. And so I just pointed out, look, all of our literary sources and also all of the archaeology that we have, and we do have quite a lot of archaeology, is that the Anglo-Saxons and the Jutes came in pretty large numbers. And initially they were probably invited in by the Romanized Brits as defense forces.
Yeah. I think large is probably, large is a pretty specious word. Because of course the original genetic profile of Britain is still to this day very, very persistent.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, one of the figures I looked at yesterday, because I was looking up this stuff yesterday in preparation for this stream, and one of the things I saw was that it's between Anglo-Saxon or Anglo-Saxon Jute DNA in UK. In some places is 25 to 40%, and it's higher in southern and eastern England than in the rest of the British Isles.
The highest you will get is in East Anglia, in which between a third to a half of the DNA profile resembles the Anglo-Saxon heritage.
Yes.
As you go further west and north, particularly, Wales is almost entirely, just a Welsh person is almost entirely Celtic.
Mm-hmm.
A
lot of Cornish people are. A lot of people in the Highlands are.
Cumbria, southwest Scotland, things like that. You're going to get a lot. You get a lot more native, and it's a general rule. Like, if you take an average person, and I had to guess how much of their DNA was inherited through a Celtic, from a Celtic individual, I would generally ballpark 80 to 85%. So as opposed to people who people will think, well, 85%, what's that mean? Well, put it this way: if I took every single individual who's ever lived on the British Isles for the past 10,000 years since the Bell Beakers arrived,
and of course they weren't the first Brits, by the way.
Yeah, but
for people in the chat.
If you go all the way back, and I took an average person from Britain, I would say that 8 to 9 of their original ancestors from 10,000 years ago lived on Britain. So, and that's just a normal Britain. And so that basically means that this sort of idea that we're a country of of which hopeless refugees have hopped onto for thousands of years, is complete rubbish. It just
Yeah.
it's not only political wish-wash; it's unscientific. It's so yeah, you got to remember that. And the other thing, of course, is that the the events that have happened in the past are not comparable to what's happened in recent times, neither in scale nor in the geographical
No.
origins of the incomers. So,
Well, one of the things I pointed out was that you can basically say that for at least 1,200 years, roughly, between somewhere around 800 AD until, in fact, probably 700 AD, and until after World War II, the British population's makeup hardly changed.
yeah,
Yeah, for over 1,200 years. And of course, let us bear in mind that the Maori in New Zealand, who only arrived there a few hundred years ago, are considered indigenous. So if the Maori in New Zealand are considered indigenous, you can certainly say that the Anglo-Celtic people of Britain are absolutely indigenous.
yeah. And the other thing you have to say is like, well, indigenous, blah, 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 blah. And you can always just say, well, indigenous, of course, is a comparative term, you idiot.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
The Bantus in Africa are not indigenous
Nope.
compared to the Khoisan.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and most Native American tribes are not indigenous to the land they were living on, compared to other Native Americans who were living on the land. So,
Yeah. I mean, look, for the South African example, I lived in South Africa for 15 years, for God's sake, and when the first white people arrived in the Cape in the 1600s, we're talking way back, like sort of English Civil War period, when the first Dutch guys arrived there were no Bantu there.
No.
They hadn't arrived yet. In fact, the Afrikaners only met the first Bantu about 100 years after they arrived in South Africa on the Great Fish River, well into the Cape, long hundreds and hundreds of miles from Cape Town. Because the Bantu, who originated in Central and Eastern Africa, had gradually been moving south.
More west, Central and West Africa.
Yeah, so, all right, fair enough. Central and West Africa, but then they moved into East Africa and then went south.
To an extent,
pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, that was certainly the understanding when I was like reading a lot about that.
So the Swahili tribes on the east are not Bantus; they're pygmies, and it's actually quite interesting because you can look at the different body structure, and one has more and like in East Africa there is a more long, skinny body build, and that's designed for running for long periods of time, chasing down animals.
Yep.
And versus West Africa, which is a more mesomorphic shape, they're more muscular and generally designed for close quarters combat, because generally Bantu societies are slightly more warlike. And then you've got the Khoisan, who are very small, nimble little creatures. I shouldn't have said that, but little guys, and they're and they're all about efficiency.
And you also in the Cape, you also had people called the Hottentots, who were related to the Khoisan but not the same. They were a bit taller for one thing, and adopted horses fairly early on. But those guys simply they died out because they interbred with everybody else, pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the idea that a Bantu African in the Cape is an indigenous African is like they arrived there even later than the Maori arrived in New Zealand, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, these are actually all very good points to basically turn the idea of how people consider what an indigenous person is on its head, because it's just because like there is just simple facts about the fact that a lot of humans seem to have moved around a lot. Humans do a lot of wars. That's just who we are. And no matter who you are, I guarantee you there's one ancestor in your history at least one, probably thousands, who had to either rape, kill, or who either raped, killed, or enslaved in order to secure his genetic legacy or her genetic legacy.
Yeah, of
That's
course
just a simple. That's just how it is.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
I totally agree. That's the way humans always were.
yeah.
And the first people who really stopped that were the British in the 19th century, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, all of this sort of decayed and died in different manners. I mean, wars have been becoming less dangerous since forever. Since as soon as someone figured out how to farm, slavery has, in general, become less brutal as time has gone on, and things like that. But of course,
but also more common, Ozzy. I mean, one of the things I think is definitely worth bringing out is that slavery in Africa was pretty much dead in let's say 1950, and is now on the rise.
Yeah.
Since all African countries are now independent again, it's on the rise again.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a simple. Yeah, that's. But that comes from a pretty traditional human style of governing, which is called kleptocracy, which people can look up, in which basically you enrich yourself at the expense of others. At the expense of other tribes. And that's just the traditional tribal way of war, and a lot of people, a lot of people just, it's very easy to default to that. It's within the human spirit to do that. So.
Yeah, it just really puzzles me. I mean, one of the things I saw on my weekly scan of the Bias Brainwashing Corporation was there's a push by some Africans to make Swahili the Pan-African lingo, as opposed to English, which it is at the moment. This BBC story said, yeah, we should stop using the colonialist language. Well, I'm sorry to say that Swahili was mostly spread by Arab slavers.
Yeah. And,
that's where that comes from, really.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, you would have thought they would do something because in Africa, the most populous region is in West Africa. So you would have thought they would have chosen one of like Nigerian or Ghanaian or something like that.
Yep.
I mean, Swahili. I mean, it's spoken in a lot of countries. I think it's spoken all the way up to southern Somalia to Botswana.
But it's basically East African.
But it's basically East Africa, and it's in pretty low population areas.
And it was really spread by the Arab slavers who used to run the damn place until the Brits arrived.
Yeah, you don't hear much about the trade those guys did.
No.
But
there was still raw. I always use this is called Splendid Isolation, and our thumbnails every week are about the Royal Navy in the 19th century. The Royal Navy was still running anti-slavery patrols in the Gulf of Arabia or the Red Sea well into the 1920s to stop Arab slavers. And that's just the truth. They were.
Yeah. And you also got to remember that the Ottoman Sultan's harem was often guarded by a black eunuch. Multiple.
Which, by the way, is why there are not large numbers of black people in Arab nations, because most of the males were castrated.
Yeah.
But of course, no one talks about, the Arabs were great guys for the Africans. They really were.
Yeah.
It's just, whoa. 555 in the chat, absolutely correct. General Gordon was a great warrior against the Arab slave trade. Yes, he was. And the thing that eventually got rid of the Arab slave trade in East Africa and Northeast Africa was the British. Just as the original slaves who were sold to white slave traders overwhelmingly by Africans who'd already enslaved these people in war, was in West Africa, and that was with big military African empires like the Ashanti, for example, in West Africa, who had held loads and loads of slaves, and the people who got rid of the Ashanti eventually were indeed the British. Surprise. So, but again, all of this stuff just gets completely it's not talked about by the MSM, and it's just all pretend. Not real history at all. Not real history at all. I mean, slavery was endemic in Africa until the arrival and the settlement and conquest of the place by Europeans, and particularly by the Brits. And it was the Brits who stopped it. No one else did.
Yeah. But so
I mean, there's actually just one more thing, George, before you go on. People might have watched Academic Agent's video on Liberia. And Liberia was set up by the Americans after the American Civil War as a home for freed American slaves to go back to Africa. Now, first of all, most of them didn't want to go back. But the ones who did go back, the first thing they did when they got there was enslave the locals, the local black Africans. This was freed American slaves. That was the first bloody thing they did.
Yeah.
And next door to Liberia, the British set up a similar kind of thing in a country called Sierra Leone. And Sierra Leone, because the British stayed there into the early 1960s, I think about 1961, Sierra Leone was given independence. That never happened there. And what Sierra Leone was for was like the tens of thousands of slaves who were freed by the Royal Navy anti-slavery patrols in the Atlantic. That's where they were sent. And because the Brits stayed there until 1961, I think it was, didn't have the same problems. But as recently as 2000, a civil war in Liberia spread over into Sierra Leone, and the British had to send warships and Royal Marines and British soldiers there to stop the bloody civil war. And that was just in 2000. So, this idea that, and Liberia is a good example. Liberia was one of the only two African countries that was never run by a European power. And yet it's one of the biggest shitholes in Africa, a continent which is really full of shitholes, it has to be said. And I lived there for a long time. And I've been I lived in South Africa for 15 years, but I've been to about 15 different African countries. And trust me, they are not the best places in the world for the most part. You haven't said anything for ages, Napoleon. You got anything to add about some of this stuff?
Back to you, Duke.
No, I was just asking. I don't like to. He's probably not listening. Perhaps he's busy. He might be busy. Yeah, I don't know. I like I say, I just think there's a lot of cant and crap around this subject. There really is. And the idea that Swahili, which is the language of the Arab slavers, should become the African language is just, to me, it's quite amusing. Actually, it really is.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add on to this. You might be able to tell. So,
I will agree with 555 in the chat. General Gordon's, reading about General Gordon is very, very interesting. He was a most interesting chap. There's actually a really good documentary you can even find on YouTube called Charlie Gordon, which is really good, well worth reading, and gives you a little bit of his background before, of course, he was eventually killed in Khartoum by the Dervish Ansar. Because the Brits sent the relief expedition too late under Gladstone, which Gladstone was pretty good at that sort of thing. I'm not a big Gladstone fan, but anyway. But yeah, and of course, slavery was rife in the Sudan from the time that Gordon was killed in 1885 until 1898, when the British sent another expedition down there under Kitchener and basically defeated the dervishes at the Battle of Omdurman. And then we got rid of the slave trade again. And as I said, since the Europeans and the Brits have left Africa, there's there's no such thing as an African colony anymore. Slavery is making a big comeback in Africa because Africans are not against it. Strange to say. But there we go. The other one I wanted to bring up, George, and I mentioned it briefly before you came on, was that last week there was another gang of so-called grooming gang people sent to jail. And these guys were sent to jail for repeatedly raping a 13 and 14-year-old girl.
Jesus.
And one of them got 5 years. I'm not joking.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure one of them had several counts of rape, and he only got 12 years. And you'd probably be released.
You're quite correct, Napoleon. About 3 of them got 12 years, but one of them only got 5.
So generous.
And I mean, basically, if you get 5 years in a British jail these days, that means you'll do 3, probably.
You could even, if I've heard of doing 6 months before parole, if you have good behaviour.
Well, I know there's been several stories, which only in local newspapers, of course, because the national media will never pick it up. There's been several stories of a lot of these so-called grooming gangs, which are in fact Pakistani child rape gangs. These people, mostly Pakistani, but almost entirely Muslim. There's been several stories of these people being released and now back in the towns they're supposed to be in, even though some of them were supposed to be deported because they were illegal immigrants, but they're still there.
Yeah, it's pretty.
It doesn't get covered. This is tens of thousands of white British children that we're talking about here. Tens of thousands. And when you bring it up, you'll get some lefty wank turn around and say, oh, well, there was Jimmy Savile. Now, all right, Jimmy Savile was a vile nonce. Absolutely was, but he was one bloke. Protected by the BBC, by the way, but one bloke. And we're not talking about one bloke. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of these people and thousands of little British schoolgirls, some of them as young as 9. And if it was the other way around, if it was white people doing this to immigrants, it would be banner headlines on every mainstream media every single day, instead of being completely covered up, which it is. And the government even covered up the official report on it, which you may know a little bit about, George, because you're into all this kind of stuff.
Sorry. I was digging through, because some people claim that there's this claim floating around that white British people are the majority of grooming gangs, which of course is, one, statistically to be expected, but 2,
yeah, but they're not really grooming gangs. It's just they're just talking about all nonsense, basically.
Yeah, but I'm trying to find any source for the claim, because I'm 90% sure it doesn't. It's not that. That's not true.
No, of course it's not in terms of that. I mean, like the Pakistanis, for example, are enormously overrepresented as a demographic in this stuff. Hound of Ulster in the chat said, didn't that bloke get longer for owning books? Yes, you're entirely right. That guy who had a couple of books which you can legally buy on Amazon got 5 years. So having a couple of books that you can legally buy on Amazon is as bad as raping 13 and 14-year-old children, according to the British legal system at the moment. And yeah, it's fine though. It's all right. It's entirely fair.
Yeah. One of the big reasons they can't actually do this is because there's just simply not enough prison space. And building prisons is expensive, because they've got to give them swimming pools and and
color television and what have you.
Yeah, so we can't really afford many of those.
Yeah. But I mean, look, we got a little bit distracted here because we were talking about the Conservative plan at the moment for over the next 10 years importing 700,000, mostly third world immigrants a year. I mean, it's just fucking insane.
Yeah.
That 700,000 a year is ridiculous into such an overcrowded place. Like, I mean, the UK population is officially what now, George? 66 million, 67?
60, I'm pretty sure it's 68. I could have a look. I mean, you have to remember that all these estimates are what they are. 67 million. Is
Yeah,
the official estimate.
and that's minus the 1 to 2 million illegal immigrants that everyone agrees we do have.
Yeah, 67. I would guess it's probably closer to 69 or 70.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm an old bugger, as you guys know. I'm 57 next month, right? And I remember all the way from when I was a child at school up until certainly the 1990s, the UK population did not much vary. It was between 54 and 58 million over all that time. And even that expansion was mostly immigration because, of course, our birth rates are appalling for white Anglo-Celtic British people, that is. But it went up maybe 4 million over about 30 years, and since then it's gone up at least 10 million over a far shorter period of time. It's just insane. And as I said, the Anglo-Celtic white British birth rates are appalling. And like, this is a subject I've talked about several times, because if we don't solve this, then even ending mass immigration won't do any good if we could somehow manage to do that. You've got to get white British Anglo-Celtic women getting married at a reasonable age, which is to say before they're 30, and having 2 to 3 kids, not 0 or 1. Because if you're only going to have 0 or 1 child, that's basically extinction rates of breeding. You've got to change that. It's absolutely essential.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's entirely. I don't think it can all be done. Like, I think I was having a conversation with a techie guy last night, and we're both pretty sure that AI and automation can make up for a lot of this.
Yep.
But so I'm not entirely sold on the idea that we need to have birth rates. But
I think
of course,
you've got to have at least
decide,
replacement rates, surely.
Well, it's quite complicated. Well, no, I'll let obviously do it because I'm sure he has.
The thing is that that's not necessarily true, because if you have
For now,
like it depends how ridiculous your population decline is. Like if it's like 0.5 children or something like that, yeah, that's probably not sustainable. But if it's like if everyone's having around about a kid, then you can actually manage it by simply like people would have to accept a higher rate of tax, but it is most definitely feasible. So, I mean, yeah, I would argue that it could be done, but I understand that's controversial. So,
I would just say, look, Devonian in the chat says Conservative plan make more money. It isn't really. The Conservative plan is line go up. That's not the same as making money. Like GDP, and George will probably know more about this than I do, but GDP is a terrible way of actually measuring a nation's real wealth.
like, it does measure something.
I know measures something. I mean, that's how you can tell that, Russia's GDP is Italy's, but it doesn't really measure power, for example.
No, but it's not. But like, it's not meant to measure power. It's meant to measure the amount of stuff your country produces.
Does it though? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's so. The traditional definition of GDP is the dollar sum value. Normally you pin the dollar to a certain year to adjust for inflation. It's the dollar sum value of every good and service produced in the economy within the last year. That's the definition. Now, that of course has some problems because it doesn't account for the fact that a lot of that money can be tied up in wealth funds and mutual funds and things like that, which aren't actually doing anything. They're just sitting there. That can include things that are held on bank accounts. That can include a whole, that can include a whole bunch of useless stuff. And there, I will agree, it's pretty useless. And the other thing, of course, is that people use GDP per capita to measure individuals' wealth. But of course, the reality is that a country, the average household income is always going to be lower than GDP per capita because of inequality, and even more so, with inequality rising, the real wage has generally not tracked with GDP. So just because the country's grown does not mean that people's income has grown, and that extent, it really doesn't mean that much. But if you're a politician and you want to grow, if you want to grow GDP, having more workers come in and just do jobs will increase it, but it will not increase it per capita.
But also, obviously, as we've said many times, at the same time, it forces up housing costs. I mean, not just the cost of buying a home, but also rental prices. And at the same time, it also forces down it forces down wages, particularly for lower skilled jobs.
Yeah.
So it's not a simple bringing loads of people in makes everyone richer, because it bloody well doesn't, as you were kind of saying, George.
Yeah, it doesn't make everyone richer. It makes the country, in a rather nebulous fashion, richer, and it makes employers richer.
Yes,
but I mean, it's not entirely a coincidence that profits have gone up since the 1980s to quite a considerable extent, and real wages haven't.
yeah.
That's always a good sign that the labor supply has grown.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question about this in a minute, but we've got a question in the chat that I want to address before it disappears. John McNamara is saying, I'm during the panel. Do you think religion will make a comeback in the UK? You guys, I mean, presumably he means the Brits, are one of the most atheist countries in Europe. Why do you think UK in particular is so atheistic? I've got an answer to that, but George and Napoleon, you go for it first.
Because I'll just say it's because things like schools and the government actively try their hardest not to promote it, so kids don't really grow up in that kind of environment. Well, that's at least from what I know. I'm sure there's lots of other things, but that's probably the primary reason why.
Well, there's a few reasons. Firstly, the UK is one of the most individualist countries in the world. Arguably the most individualist country in the world, since the United States has changed its demographic profile considerably. And individualism and religion is typically a collective process. It's more sociological than psychological. And so I think the typical Brit is not drawn to collective affairs as much as people are on the continent or in other areas of the world. The other reason I would probably wager is that we have had a anti-religious, a strong anti-religious intellectual movement for a very, very long time. It goes back to even like John Stuart Mill, and even before that, Thomas Hobbes rather, was pretty ambiguous on his own opinion of God, and he was and he was very much an egalitarian, and so I would. And I think this is also reflected in the fact that most of the American founding fathers were not Christian. They were most of them were some form of theist or deist, but it seems very much in the British psychometric profile, at least since the 18th century, that we seem like a very atheistic bunch. Will it make a comeback? The answer is, to a limited extent, yes. Because there are certain things that are going in our favor, going in religious favor, I should say, because we're trying to give an objective answer. First thing is that we've just had a pandemic. Now, whether true or not, a lot of people have had and people who are going under high degrees of stress are far more likely to turn to God. Second reason, we are getting stupider. Yay. Now, people think I personally think it's a good thing, because stupid people are typically breed more, are happier, and more. They trust their gut feelings more that their nation is good, and that they should look after themselves and not everyone else. And so that will also mean that people are willing to put their faith in the ethereal more. And so I do believe that people, not just in the UK but worldwide, will become more religious. I don't think it will be either instantaneous, nor will it come in a linear fashion. You're going to have bumps, and we're going to have a bunch of bumps and drops before we get into a religious area. But I have in that regard. Franz is bringing up the fact that there's some buzzing, and I am hearing some buzzing too. So I'm just going to mute myself.
I've
Listen,
full time, but
there's always a little bit of buzzing on streams, guys. I'm sorry if you don't like the buzzing. Then
also
you have to put up with it, man. I cannot get my sound perfect. I do not have a $20,000 studio. Okay.
Also, I'd like to. I misinterpreted the question. I thought he said agnostic, but he said atheist. So
yeah. And also, can it make a comeback? Napoleon was the other question. Can religion make a comeback?
I don't really give a shit about whether or not. Well, no, okay, that sounds horribly in a political sense, unless because no, probably not. I don't really care. But as someone who supports the Kirk, then yes, I do. I mean, just by proxy, I support it, but I don't really care enough to do the research, so I don't really have an opinion. But yeah.
All right. Well, look. What I would say is this. First of all, a lot of the relatively young men I do streams with, like George and Napoleon and Adaman and one or two others, are certainly describe themselves as Christians. And these chaps are all much younger than me. Like I used to describe myself as an atheist. I don't anymore. I call myself an agnostic these days, which is probably about as far as I can actually go and still be honest. If you ask me why religion died a death in the UK, the start of it was absolutely World War I. In my opinion, like the Church of England's total support for World War I and the enormous and unprecedented casualties that Britain took, because Britain didn't raise mass armies to fight in Europe. If you want to go and find out about this, go and watch our stream on John Chalmers' book, Splendid Isolation, Britain and the Balance of Power in Europe 1874 and 1914, because we talk about this a lot there, and George is one of the guys on that. I think that was the start of it. I think in the 1920s, a lot of people who would have been like regular or semi-regular churchgoers in UK just stopped. And it never recovered. And of course, from the 1960s onwards, the Church of England became more and more woke, in inverted commas, and left-wing and feminist and happy-clappy and all this other crap. And that even drove the traditionalists away for the most part. That's not to say there are not still good local churches in the UK. There are some. I got married in a High Church of England church. My son was baptized in a High Church of England church. I have to say he was baptized mostly for traditional reasons rather than religious ones in my case. But I was happy to do it, and my wife wanted to, so okay. And I certainly wasn't against it. But but that was a good vicar in a good village church in the home counties. But they are the exception. They're not the rule, sadly.
Yeah, and I mean, my general thing about it is that Limbo can actually tell you much more about this than I can, because Limbo is a Catholic, and
Yep.
Catholicism is on course to be the new largest denomination in the UK, which is that's pretty unprecedented if you think about it. But, but I mean, even Catholicism is being drained away, and he would argue that, and a lot of traditional Catholics do, is that it's because you get a lot of modernist sort of things.
Well, the Pope, the current Pope, is not like a traditional figure as far as I can work out.
The current Pope isn't helping, but I mean, this has been a thing for a long time in a lot of churches, and there's something. I mean, for me, it's particularly true, but there's something about going into a church, sitting down, and then all of a sudden you hear someone like strum a guitar, in which for me at the very least, but I think for a lot of people, your head reels and your eyes roll into your head from the cringe. And I mean, I know this is particularly not true. I mean, so for example, even the evangelicals, like there is still a very strong evangelical root, particularly in the Anglican Church. But I would argue that a lot of people are getting really turned off by happy clappy, particularly among young people. Like in Catholic churches, if you go to the extraordinary form, which is now becoming incredibly hard to do, it is chock full of people. People love the extraordinary form, which is the Latin form.
Yeah, the Latin Mass, which the current Pope was not really very supportive of.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Limbo's much better informed to tell me about this. But so my local parish, my Orthodox parish, is, and the Orthodox Church takes great pride in never ever changing. We will sooner all be conquered and enslaved by barbarians than change. I mean, that literally happened in Constantinople. So
that could be arranged.
But we've had 10 converts this year, like little parish.
Are they younger people, George? Mostly.
Most of them are between the years of 15 and 45, I would say. I mean, they're a broad sort, but like, and some of them come from atheistic backgrounds, and some of them come from Church of England backgrounds. But I mean, I would have never thought in my lifetime I would actually see anyone other than me change, be doing confirmation and church conversion. But I seem to be quite mistaken in that. So it's complicated.
Do you think there is a hunger among younger people for something to bloody well believe in, for God's sake? Because there just isn't anything in modern Western society.
Some, not all, and by no means most. So, I mean, young people in particular had a huge upswing in church attendance after COVID. And there was actually, for the first time ever, a while ago, I can't remember, but I can't remember when this poll was released, but it was like for the first time ever, this generation had not been more liberal than the last. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's still not very liberal. It's still very liberal, but it's not like decidedly changing into a more liberal generation. I don't. I think there's probably a small group, mainly younger men.
Yeah.
But there is definitely a sort of. I think there's a feeling of a need for. I wouldn't say roots, but a feeling like that there is a point to the relatively arduous bullshit and monosyllabic nature of a day to day life. Because I think like more than anything, like more than global homo, more than the degeneracy and everything. I think it's the monosyllabicism that gets to everyone in day to day life. It's a sort of the idea of you're still single at 30, you still work a shitty office job, and you haven't changed cubicle in the past 2 years. The commute is still awful. And you're still cramped into the same tube, and you come back and you eat your ready-made meal. And like, I think that more than anything else is what kills people about modernity. And I think that's the offer that religion can basically move you past. Do I believe that this is either a permanent thing or B longer lasting and a hope for the future? Maybe, I don't know. I'm very doubtful that what we'll be seeing is a rise in permanent church attendance over the next 10 years. I don't think that's going to happen.
I would just say, George, that like everyone, as far as I know, everyone on my Discord, which is a small Discord, by the way, folks, it's like under 30 people. Everyone on that Discord is younger than me. And I think I'm right in saying that the majority of the chaps on it, which is everyone except one, there's only one woman in my Discord, are Christians or would describe themselves as Christians. I don't think any of them wouldn't, that I know of specifically anyway. So I don't know. I'm not saying that like my Discord is like a little shot of the world, because it isn't. If they're on my Discord for a reason, but yeah, I suppose it gives you some hope in that sense, maybe.
To be honest, for the past for either 1 or 2 years ago, I haven't practiced at all. As soon as I move away, I have been planning for the past few months. As soon as I move away from home to get back into practicing Christianity, but I don't know. I kind of have problems calling myself a Christian these days because I don't practice, because I'm a lazy arsehole, and there are 3 parts of my island, and the only still surviving church is on the other side, full of the other people, and it's way too far for me to even be arsed to even think about making the trip down there.
Other people.
Well,
I think I know what he means, but
yeah, I think I know what he means too. But
yeah, so my side of the island is all of the normal, you could say British people, and then the other side is the
Scots.
you-know-whats. Yeah. Yeah.
The
But
takes, as you would some would say.
That's the one.
Yeah. No offense to the folks in the chat who happen to be of a more Roman persuasion, might we say?
Well, there's something I saw that was so that was quite upsetting. Do you know the St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh?
Yeah.
Well, apparently the Kirk was thinking of either giving it away to a state agency or selling it because they just weren't making enough money to keep it. I think like the congregation halved, and it was in like a radical new plan, which is a fucking shame, because that was founded like 800, 900 years ago.
Yeah.
Very, very, very old history. Absolutely beautiful cathedral. It's in Edinburgh. Has an absolutely gorgeous organ. I can play piano quite well. I've always wanted to learn how to play the organ because it's such a
it's an instrument of great. Yeah.
Very, very moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fucking sad. Very sad.
Yeah, that stuff is always sad. I mean, like when they just abandon churches and they get turned into bloody whatever they get turned into.
Yeah.
I would agree. Nemo in the chat, organized religion is over. Everyone knows most churches, preachers are scams. There might be a resurgence in spirituality once psychedelics get decriminalized. Sorry, mate, I just think that's total crap. You know, I look, listen, and I'm an agnostic. I'm not. I can't call myself a Christian. I'm a cultural Christian, absolutely, because we all are. But I'm not a Christian because I don't disbelieve in God, but I don't believe in Him. I'm a not sure, which is why I'm an agnostic. But I just think what you said there, Nemo, is absolute crap.
Yeah, I mean,
show us your nose. Show us your nose now.
Listen, I'm going to carry on with this, because Nemo said a couple of things in the chat tonight, which I think were rubbish. But 99% of Christians are fake, bunch of hypocrites, Pharisees, Bible thumpers, Pope thumpers. They don't love their enemies. They're full of anger, hatred, and anxiety. Well, look, are some of them fake? Yeah, probably, because, like, you know, there's a load of human fakes. But also, let me say that Christianity and that love their enemies stuff is a vast oversimplification. It isn't really what Christian. I mean, yes, you get some modern woke, in inverted commas, Christians, you know, telling you constantly to turn the other cheek and all the rest of it. But actually, base Christianity isn't like that at all. You need to look up muscular Christianity, etc.
Yeah. What I would say is that, like, the end goal, like, so things like turning the other cheek, of course, are deeply, deeply misunderstood, because the original meaning of turning the other cheek was a form of insult against Roman officers, and things like if a soldier asks you to carry his stuff, carry it another mile, that's actually an insult in the Roman army, because it implied that the Roman soldier can carry his own kit. You get a lot of things. You get a lot of things which are misunderstood. And, like, you are told, of course, to be a good person, and it is the idea that the end goal, of course, is that we pray for our enemies and all that. Doesn't mean that. Doesn't
mean you can't kill them.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that it's one, possible, or two, like it means you let other people walk all over you, and three, it doesn't mean you allow it doesn't mean that you allow certain infections to go into your society. And by infections, I think we all know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, I mean, I could go on about this forever. Because it's a very simplistic view. It's understandable if you have a very simple read of the Gospels without any church interpretation or without any previous advice or anything like that. But the thing is that, like, the Bible is a very, very complicated book. It is old, compiled, multiple authors with multiple intentions, with multiple meanings. Even the four Gospels, each different four had a different intention and was to a different audience and had different meanings. It is complicated, and it has had it has gone through multiple translations. Reading it in Greek, which I'm doing at the moment, is completely different to reading it in English. So you can go through these one-dimensional attacks, and it's fine, because the world keeps turning, and people will still be going to church tomorrow. But I mean, if you want to come back with a more advanced, I think there are definitely very good criticisms of Christianity, which I'm happy to entertain. And of course, like, my faith isn't 100%. I don't think most people's are. But like, that doesn't mean that, like, but like, coming with these very simplistic sort of, well, I read the gospel and that means you have to accept someone lying, storming into your room and going to sleep in your bed, and you have to say, oh, well, you do that. That's not what we say.
Yeah.
Yeah. have a
I
bit
mean,
of
look. As an Englishman, let's look at Alfred the Great's Anglo-Saxons, who were Christians and repeatedly defeated the heathen Danes. You know, the pagan Danes repeatedly defeated them in great big massive shield war battles. So you know, those guys weren't turning the other cheek, because had they been turning the other cheek, then the Danes would have taken over all of England, and they did not, because Alfred the Great defeated them, and his son went on to create England. So you know.
Excuse me, gents. I have to go right now. I
Right.
shall see you all later. Thank you for
No,
having me
no
on,
worries,
by the way.
Napoleon. Many thanks for coming on, mate, and go well.
No problem. Right, cheerio.
Yep,
Right,
no
all the best,
worries.
pal.
Nemo in the chat, he's asking me, I guess, are you an agnostic atheist or a Gnostic atheist? I'm not an atheist. I'm an agnostic. I don't know. I have actually given this a great deal of thought. I cannot say, yes, I believe in God, but equally I cannot say there is no God. That is absolutely the position I have come to after many years of thinking about this stuff. Could there be a God? Yes, maybe. I don't know. I'm no longer in a position like I used to be many years ago. I used to turn around and say, nah, there's no such thing as God, it's rubbish, mate. I can't say that anymore. I'm sorry, I just can't. And part of the reason I can't say that anymore is that so many atheists are so bloody obnoxious. And lefties, by the way.
Well, that, and also, I'm going to be quite controversial here, but I don't think that you can actually have. I don't think you can have an idea of those who've gone before you, and a belief and a belief in tradition, without at least reverence for the faith, or a faith. Like just saying, I think, you know, frankly, I think it's a bit of a cop out. A lot of the time, people like just say, well, you know, I want to go back to, I don't like this, and this. And when you ask them why, it's because they go, well, it's not based or something like that. And for me, I personally believe that you have to have some level of fundamental view. You have to have some view of the spirit within a community to actually care about the community, because otherwise the community is just a semblance of individuals, and that ceases to have any meaning once you die. So why do you care? Or when your children die or whatever. So I would genuinely like if I think it's a bit silly to spit on religion, and like stop thinking you're smart because you're atheist. That's the other thing. Like
I mean, look, if you were smart and you were atheist, then so many atheists would not be fucking idiot lefties.
Look, like, I mean, there's such a thing as a smart lefty. But like
I have never met one, but if you say so.
But I mean, come on, you're not going to tell me that someone like the Weinstein brothers are stupid or anything.
They have stupid beliefs. Some of their beliefs are stupid. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, but like people can have erroneous beliefs. In fact, normally smart people are the ones who are better at believing stupid things because they can make up enough bullshit to sustain.
All right, George, not to interrupt you, but just I have to, because then maybe you can address this a bit more sensibly. What I find is that one of the reasons I totally disassociate myself from atheism is the fact that so many of them are feminist, leftists, basically anti-white people, anti-Western civilization, anti-white people, and I can't be doing with that. I'm sorry, I just can't. Like, it goes against everything I believe.
Sure, but the other thing I would say though is that you can have all manner of. I mean, there have been some pretty smart atheists. I mean, Richard Dawkins, regardless of how we may feel about him, philosophically, he's written some pretty astounding books.
Yeah, but his views on God are I look, my opinion. I have thought about this a lot actually, because like I in some ways I'd like to be a Christian, but I just can't do that. It's that one step too far. But some of his views, like there's no backing for them. Yeah, and and I'm not saying that I don't think like it's not possible to prove. This is why I'm an agnostic. It's not possible to prove there's a God. It's not possible to prove there isn't. And the whole flying spaghetti monster thing is a nonsense. In my opinion, anyway. It's a clever argument, but it's stupid. And like I said, most of the people who are out and out atheists these days, most of them, not all, there are still right-wing atheists, don't get me wrong, but they are very much the minority. And I've got more time for right-wing pagans than I do for atheists. Because at least they believe in something.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I understand your meaning there. And like my general thing though is that like I always can't abide people. I can't abide is a strong opening, but I would say I really struggle with people who think that stupid people, people who disagree with them are stupid. It's a really because that necessarily narrow it's just not a very generous view of humanity. And I mean, I think I mean it's far more common on the the left than that you basically say that these people don't understand because they're not educated enough or whatever. But yeah, I mean, of course, I neither A, accept that is necessarily true, or B, think it's necessarily a bad thing to be not have as much education as someone else. But that aside, like I mean, I don't think it's stupid to be an atheist. But like going to my original point, and my original point was, these people who say that they're so smart because they're atheists. It's like it's really not hard to not believe in a god. It's really you're not a really smart person because you don't believe in God. You're not really super rational. I mean, for goodness sake, like Thomas Aquinas was a very smart guy, and he believed in God. Like, I mean, Isaac Newton was a very smart person. Like, you're not some sort of genius because you don't believe in God. Like, you're smart because you're smart, no matter who you are. Nor is it necessarily a good thing that you're smart. People need to stop. Like, this is actually something that I don't like about the right wing, and like something about academic agent that I'm finding really tough to gnaw through. Is this basic idea that like intellectualism is like this huge virtue that's like a strong card for the right wing. It's like, no, it's not. It just makes you look like a bunch of douchebags.
It depends who you're talking about, George. In my opinion, it's like I think it's beyond any argument that for the vast majority of average people, a basic belief in God and Christianity is a generally good thing because of the moral system that it imparts.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really matter if they're deeply thinking about it, and they really think there's this higher person and all the rest of it. Person's probably the wrong term, but power. It doesn't matter about that. It's that if you bring the vast majority of ordinary average people up with certain moral precepts, that's a good thing for society. That's my view on it, to be honest. And like your Nemo in the chat is saying, are you an agnostic theist or an agnostic atheist? No, mate, I'm sorry. You can't just keep slicing up smaller and smaller and smaller. I am an agnostic. I am in between. I don't disbelieve in God. I don't believe in God. That's what agnostic means. That's what I am.
Yeah, there's no need to be these yeah, like there's no need to carve up all these sort of ideological things like you don't need to go, oh, I'm a post-Rawlsian social democrat with environmental values located in pre-Lockean, blah blah blah. Shut up.
Yeah.
Just shut up, please.
Yeah. I mean, people in the chat have obviously been talking about Christopher Hitchens, okay? Now, Christopher Hitchens was a very well-read and a great speaker in many respects. But Christopher Hitchens went from Trotskyist to neocon. That's basically his political trajectory. He went Trotskyist, neocon. Sorry, doesn't do it for me, mate. Didn't like either of those guys, Trotskyists or neocons. So I think that his reputation today is vastly bigger than it really should be.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like a lot of people like make big things about but he was such a deep thinker, and think of Hitchens' razor, and Hitchens' razor is this thing called which is basically that which that which can be asserted without evidence can be disclaimed, removed without evidence. We have to remember that is old. That is a very, very old belief. Bertrand Russell put it down in the history of Western philosophy under Aristotle. It's a really, really old thing. Christopher Hitchens is not a revolutionary thinker. He's a smart guy. Like, again, I'm happy to say that my opponent is a smart person, but he is not the Jesus for atheists. He's just a dude. He's just a dude who was a tiny bit too fat and died. It's really
He look. Someone in the chat said I don't mind Peter Hitchens. I like Peter Hitchens in many respects. I don't totally agree with him, but there are very few people I totally agree with. But I think Peter Hitchens is probably a bit more base than his brother, in all honesty. Like I said, and that doesn't mean I agree with every position he adopts, because I don't. But I think he's a bit more base than his brother. And like I said, that trajectory, which is not all that uncommon, between Trotskyist to neocon, Tony Blair, same thing. University Trotskyist, eventually neocon. So that's I just instinctively distrust that particular political trajectory. And let me be clear, I was always at least a standard conservative. I've never been more left wing than that. I voted for Maggie Thatcher twice. And these days I look at Maggie Thatcher and I think, well, yeah, she there's something she didn't do that she should have done, and there's something she did do that she probably shouldn't have done. But back in the day, I did. I voted for her twice. My father voted for her, for God's sake. And my father, by the way, came from a traditional Labour voting family, even though they were all military guys. Like my grandfather, who served in India on the Northwest Frontier in between the wars, and then went across on D+3, was after he left the British Army, before he rejoined again, was a big Union guy. But when Britain gave India independence in 1947, he said it was the worst thing Britain had ever done. So, let's not go along with these politically simple ideas that, one thing makes you something else, because it doesn't. All this stuff is more complicated than people think it is.
Yeah.
It just is. George, could you do me a favor, mate? I have to go to the door for like 5 seconds, and I'll be back in a minute. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. This is now my show. You're all officially my bitches. Let's have a look at the chat, see what people are talking about. Ethical standards are maintained by social norms, not by fake religion you coddle yourself in. Whence cometh social norms? That's my first question to you. Like, social norms aren't necessarily something that either comes from community behavior, which is informed by religious behavior, or it comes from something internal, perhaps biological. But it can't just. Social norms is not in of itself something that, because social norms necessarily has to be correlated with ethical norms. Otherwise, otherwise, whence cometh. Anything else? I'll say one thing: the evil of the people who took over in the last few years almost defies natural explanation. Yeah, evil is a strong word. I think evil. You need to be careful when you're using the word evil, because evil is it's a really complicated subject, and it's not very simple to just say this person is evil, because like evil typically in my mind means that you want to do bad things for bad reasons and for no other reason than because you're bad. And I think the amount of people who genuinely believe that, I mean, maybe there's like 1 or 2% of people, but I don't think they're I don't think they're a huge amount.
Most bad guys think they're good guys.
Yeah.
Even if they're totally wrong, that's what they think.
Yeah,
Sure.
and
I agree.
The people who run Davos and the WEF and whatever, I don't think they view themselves as evil. I think they view themselves as the saviors of the world who are going to bring us into a new golden era. I genuinely believe
for themselves, not for anyone else. I mean, look. You may well disagree, George, but I actually think they want to turn us into 21st century serfs. I really do. I mean, they may think that's the best thing for the world, but that's what they want to do.
It's possible.
I think that's somewhere in the hazy background of mass third-world immigration. That is the driving thing for it, because if you can homogenize all the world's populations into this same dreary beige tan low IQ stuff, that's going to be much easier to run for these guys. I mean, honestly, that's what I think they want. I mean, they, like you say, I think they may think that's the best thing in the world, but they certainly are not including themselves in what's going to happen to all the rest of us.
I genuinely think what they think they're doing is a good thing. For
the world, yeah, for the world, but not for all the vast majority of the people. I think that they're actually basically quite anti-human.
I think they're probably anti-human nature. I would definitely say that.
Yeah.
I think their sort of the perspective they would take is that, like, look, if whole cultures are wiped out by what we're doing, and if ways of life are gone, it wouldn't matter, because either most people are no longer starving, or B, we've stopped climate change, or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's, they're not thinking that they're taking a very utilitarian line of view.
Yeah.
They're thinking
very Jeremy Bentham in some respects. I think
they're taking the ends justify the means, and all this pretty crude and unhuman stuff, at least to us. Yeah. But I would wager that they themselves think what they're doing is, they're like thinking, yeah, I'm good. We're good people.
The greater good, yeah.
Like we were talking a few weeks ago about this Dr. Parakana, who wrote that article. He almost undoubtedly thinks he's a good person. He certainly makes it sound like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, of course, we don't necessarily know better, but we definitely think differently. And And
See, I think Stalin and Hitler and Mao and Pol Pot thought they were good people in some respects.
yeah. You know, all these people thought they had a mission, they had a genuine belief, and they thought they were making the world a better place. They weren't, but they thought it. And like, I think it's very much the same now. These people are, of course, they are. I mean, of course, it's relatively immaterial how they feel about
Their effect is going to be evil.
Yeah, their effect is going to be undoubtedly destructive and Tolkien-esque, but it's still, that there's still people at the end of it.
Yeah.
It's very hard to believe this because of the way you're presented to people like Jeff Bezos and all this, who are like shown as to be like these titans who glaze across your screen. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you shoved a sword up their backside, they would still believe. They'll still believe it. So.
Yeah, they'd still die. Absolutely right. And I detest Jeff Bezos, but anyway.
Oh, disgusting.
Hearn in the chat says ethical standards are maintained by social norms, not some fake religion you coddle yourself in. I'm sorry, mate. George will answer this probably from a more Christian point of view. But let me just say what I think here. Without the basic ethics of basic Christianity, there would be no social norms, or they would be very different.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there is a lot that can be said about that. So, for example, of course, you've got the Protestant work ethic, and you've got things like institutionally speaking, countries which have been exposed to Christianity for longer are typically better off economically and things like that. And you also have, and that's like including areas of the world which are not Europe. That includes places like East Asia, not East Asia, Middle East, and all those sort of things and drizzles. But like the religion has had a hard effect on the world. There is a lot of evidence for it. I mean, I don't want to go into the weeds of it all because it can get very boring very quickly. But to say that it's all in your head, like you can make an argument that the beliefs are in our heads. Sure, you can definitely make that case. I don't think it's a wrong case, but I think you can make it. You can't really make the case that institutionally religion has not had any effect on social behavior. There's no grounds for that, no. Either sociologically or historically. That's just wrong.
Yeah, look, I don't know what you think about this, but Trudeau is evil. Yes, Mighty Balls. I totally agree with that. This chap has been doing some like supposedly weirdo takes. This to me is ridiculous. 99.97% people are pure evil. Schopenhauer and Spinoza were clear. Narrow is the path few will understand. Even fewer will walk it. I'm sorry, mate. The idea that 99.99% of people are pure evil is just total bullshit. I'm sorry, it just is.
Pure evil is like when you are like pure evil.
You'd have to be Satan, you know.
Pure evil is like simply going into someone's house and like throwing rocks through their window simply because you can. Like pure evil,
and then killing all their children and their
pure
wife.
Evil is not like pure evil. There's a difference between that and finding a tenner on the street and not turning it into the police station. Like, like there's a difference. I mean, come on. This is like, I mean, you can talk about philosophy.
I think you could say that most people have evil bits. I certainly do.
Yeah,
probably more than most, but I certainly do have evil bits. But the idea that most people are pure evil is fucking ridiculous. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's just. Come on, man.
I mean, some lost child in a shopping centre will get. Yes, there'll be the occasional nonce who would do evil shit to them, but the vast majority of people will try to help them.
Yeah, it's like it's a bit much that you can't really genuinely believe that, can you? Like, I mean, you're talking about these philosophers, and like, I'm going to tell you something, okay? Philosophy, there is no proof in philosophy. There is nothing necessarily true in philosophy. If you think religion is all in my head, let me tell you something. Philosophy is definitely all in your head.
For sure.
There is no, none of these guys will have objective criteria. They're jotting things on paper that sound right to them. Okay, that's all there is to it. Now, some of it can be pretty profound and it might change your mind in many ways, and that's great for you, but that doesn't mean that it's true. It means that you like it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that makes me a Philistine to you. I'm okay being that evil boogeyman if that's what it takes. But like,
Mate, look, I've known like a lot of soldiers in my life, for example, and soldiers are trained to kill people. And if you've got a volunteer army like Britain has had for donkey's years now, the people who join that are self-selecting to some point. But you know what? You will hardly find kinder people to helpless people like children and dogs and all this kind of stuff than British soldiers. You will hardly find nicer people to those. Are there exceptions? Are there odd absolute arseholes in the British Army? Yeah, sure, of course there are. Do they sometimes make mistakes? Yes, of course they do. But in terms of actually like the overall average of them being nice to kids and dogs, like if I was a kid or a dog, I'd want the British Army to invade me every time. Because they're actually kind to those people most of the time. They're actually kind to little old ladies and women most of the time. They might like make rude comments to like pretty young women, but that's probably as far as most of them will go, unless given some encouragement, you know. So I just that idea that 99.99% of evil are is just fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, it's a really bizarre thing to say. Like, yeah, like you read about someone like Durgelvanger, who was a SS colonel, and then go ahead and tell me that he's as evil as everyone else. Seriously, go ahead and do that for me. Come on.
The other one, George, there was an SS medical officer in Berlin right at the end of the war, who was also a bit of a hero in some respects.
Yeah.
So none of this stuff is simple black and white nonsense. It just isn't. And Hound of Ulster, yes, I saw your comment in the chat about Argentinian soldiers' ears for a necklace. And I still don't agree with you. Like, honestly, what you're saying there, Hound of Ulster, is that like for most of human history, when many, many, many human groups took heads, and they did all over Europe, for example, Northern Europe, it's very, very common, including in UK, like in like when the Romans invaded and stuff like that. You're trying to tell me all the people that ever did that were totally evil? Well, I'm sorry, they weren't. It was just their culture, which kind of got changed by religion.
I'm not going to say that they're pure evil, but I mean, and I definitely disagree with you on this, but I definitely have my limits, and that is probably one of them.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, and your limits are going to be less than mine, mate, because I've probably seen a bit more stuff. So
Yeah.
If you're sitting here in say 30 years' time, and particularly if you've spent any time in the military over that 30 years, your opinion might change a bit, but we'll see.
Yeah, I understand that. I just there's certain things that I would say nah. I mean, I'm not going to say that people who did that are evil, and I mean, men become very different people once they're in combat, and I completely understand that. I think anyone who's ever actually been in a fisticuffs will understand that. But come
This is something I wanted to ask you, George, as a young man. Right?
Yeah.
What percentage of like the younger male Brit population do you think has been in a fight after they left school?
After they left school?
Yeah, not when they were at school, because playground fights are just different.
God, I don't know. I mean, I myself have been in one.
And
now,
you're a very young chap. You're like in your early 20s.
I'm 21, so
yeah.
So you're gonna have to sort of taste. But like my fight was encountered through work. Someone was basically I was just your pub guy. I was a keg lifter, and all that. And I had a customer who was being rude to me, and eventually he asked me to take it outside. My boss wasn't around, so we had a scrap. Like that. That's a thing that has happened. How many other people my age have done it? I don't really know. Probably, I would definitely say less than there used to be. I mean, fights are pretty normal. They're just what people do. They're what men do, because we're kind of stupid. But
well, we're also full of testosterone and want to prove ourselves. But
yeah, and but yeah, I would definitely say that less men have been in fights in recent times.
I'm getting that impression from listen, I'm not. How can I describe this? I wouldn't describe myself as a violent man. I can think of many occasions when I could have got in a fight and I didn't because I chose not to.
Yeah.
But I've been in since, and this is not counting in the military. In the military itself, yeah, I got in a few fights because you do in the military. But outside of the military, in civilian life, since I left school, I would say I've been in, I don't know, 12.5 or something like that fights of one disc. Some of them were like, one punch stories, and some of them were big time punch ups. But maybe like 18, 19. And as I say, that's not in the military, because in the military you get in fights more often for obvious reasons for anyone with any common sense, and not when I was at school. But I can think of many occasions when I could have got in a fight and I didn't because I thought, no, I don't want to do this, mate. And I will say that a lot of the times when I did, it was because a woman was involved, and partly that's because it's your woman, and like if it's your woman and you
it's pretty fucking self-evident. Like
you kind of have to. You just have to. Even though sometimes you can actually see she organized it in some respects,
Yeah.
But I just think there's this push to make Western white men less and less, what's the word I would use? Manly, I guess. There's definitely a push for that, and it's from people who are our enemies, overwhelmingly.
Yeah, I would say a lot of this is actually kind of natural because everyone lives more cushy lives these days, and so, and of course, men. Oh, it's just me. Yeah. I think I should probably clear this up. Hound of Ulster, neither of us won. We both got exhausted, and he basically put his hand up and said he wanted to sit down, and I had to get back to work. So we basically called it there. But so while it's me, we're going to now talk about why men are less violent, and that is because of this thing called testosterone. Now, testosterone has been falling considerably over the past 50 years, as far as we're aware, and possibly longer. And so, and a lot of that is to do with things like, oh, I see you're back, Duke.
Yeah. Sorry, mate. If look, I've got this weird thing on my computer, if my hand goes even close to the connection to my microphone, I disconnect. I don't know what it is. It's probably a ghost or something, but I didn't even touch it. My hand went over it, and there it went. So yeah, but I was listening to you, mate. Carry on.
So testosterone has been decreasing for a long time, and you guys can actually watch this really funny video by BuzzFeed. You're going to have to go through a lot of soy to get to the punchline, but basically, a lot of these guys have they go get their testosterone checked, and all these guys have their testosterone below the healthy amount for a 60-year-old man. It's bloody hilarious. But I mean, a lot of that has been happening naturally because we live pretty cushy lives. Some of us are desk jockeys. Well, most of us these days are actually our jobs will be one manner of desk jockey or another. We're getting less exercise.
You're not supposed to get drunk in pubs anymore. Pubs are supposed to stop giving you alcohol if they think you're drunk.
Yeah. That's an actual problem.
What's the point of going to a pub if they stop serving you alcohol if you're drunk? That's the whole point of going, for God's sake.
I mean, there is some reasons.
No good ones, I have to say. No good ones. The point of going to a pub is to get drunk. If you don't want to get drunk, why are you drinking alcohol? Come on.
I personally drink because I like the taste.
Wow.
I'm possibly one of the few people, maybe one of the few people in the world who unironically enjoys the taste of Scotch. But
no, I love the taste of Scotch, but I used to drink pint. When I was in the British Army in the fucking early 80s. 8 pints was what you did on a Saturday night, and then you got a bloody curry on the way back to barracks, you know, unless of course you got lucky, but with a girl, I mean, but yeah, I would like. I don't drink beer these days, not much anyway. But I used to drink 8 pints a night when I was out because that's what everyone did, you know. It's
well, yeah. I mean, yeah. But I mean, I wouldn't advocate alcoholism because that's actually another thing that nukes your testosterone. You shouldn't drink too much. People drink. Have like 1 or 2 days a week in which you say, "I'm going to drink them." Friday and Saturday, say, and then just drink them. That's
that's what I did when I was a young man. Like my drinking was Friday, Saturday mostly. I have to say it was, but it was binge drinking when I did it on Friday and Saturday because that's what everyone in the army did. Because like the army deal was in bed or out barracks if you were off duty, you know. Because if you're not in bed or out of barracks, then they're going to give you stupid jobs you don't want. But yeah, I honestly, I totally agree with what you're saying. But I do think there is a definite push to make Western white men less masculine than they used to be.
Invariably, yeah.
And it's a totally bad thing from the point of view of our society.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're going to have mass immigration at the same time.
Yeah. But yeah. There is definitely a big problem with people who are. There is definitely a big problem with sperm counts and things like that. But we once were warriors.
I was just going to say some of us still are, but yeah.
Yeah.
I'll stop being a warrior when I die.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we kind of live in a world in which there's no more fights, or fortunately, depending on who you ask.
No, it's not. It's not. I tell you another thing I noticed, George, which you can tell me whether you think is still true. Like I've seen some pretty big bar fights, yeah,
Yeah.
and the women around them, even if they sometimes had quite a good deal to do with starting them, which they sometimes do because women are like that. It's kind of like a version of a shit test.
Yeah.
They got really scared really quick when they actually started going off, and like pint glasses were getting thrown around, and bar stools and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it's
and
a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, the women just want out of that place. Okay, and yet somehow we're supposed to have them as soldiers.
Well, we already. I've already discussed this with you ad nauseum. I think it's a very, very stupid idea.
I'm doing a segue. I'm doing a segue here, George.
Yeah. Irrespective of whether you think they could be soldiers, I don't think they can. No. But even if they are, it immediately compromises the integrity of a regiment, of any unit, because men are wired to view people in danger, women in danger rather, as something that they should put their line, they should sacrifice for. And so if you are a platoon and all of a sudden your lieutenant has gone and and leapt into fire for private nice titties and died, then you're all of a sudden without your officer, and that's not fun. So
and also one of the things I would also point out is that the guys who are most wired to do that are often your best soldiers. Your best and bravest soldiers are the ones who are actually going to go and save private nice tissies or good Lexington stockings. It's this is the way things work. But absolutely. But I am doing a bit of a segue here, I have to say, because I just wanted to let people know that I'm going to be doing a stream on Tuesday. Listen. Hang on. I need to go and look this up because I'm crap at maths. Really am. Where are we? Let me go and look this up. Where am I getting it? Oh, okay. I will be doing a stream with Don the Pleb, the former US Marine Corps NCO guy, on Tuesday next week at 01 GMT. That's Zulu time if you're in the military. And I think that's about 1 a.m. Tuesday UK time and 12 noon Wednesday Eastern Australian time. And it's going to be on Don's channel, and it's going to be about the ever-increasing feminization of the Western Armed Forces and why it's a bad thing. And our current plan is that we will do a follow-up stream on Thursday, probably on my channel, about why our so-called Western, in inverted commas, elites think that's a good idea. So Bilbo Balboa in the chat, I said 0100 hours Tuesday Greenwich Mean Time, Zulu time. So that is it's I think it's still Tuesday UK time. Go on, George, you can look it up for me, mate. You're probably better at this than me. As far as I can work out, 01 GMT, Zulu time, should be 1 a.m. Tuesday UK time. So 1 o'clock in the morning.
What was the time you said?
01 a.m. 0100 GMT.
Okay. GMT in terms of Australia or
GMT? GMT is the same everywhere, mate. That's why
no, but but I mean, like, I don't know what you mean by Zulu time.
Greenwich Mean Time.
Yeah,
0100
against Australia, against Australian time, right?
Doesn't make any difference, man. Well, you can give it to us in UK and Australia if you like.
No. What time is it where you are living?
I think that's 12 noon on Wednesday Eastern Australian time. I think.
Okay. Sec. Can quickly do that. It's about 10 a.m.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's earlier than that.
Oh no! I'm wrong because it's giving me the wrong thing.
Oh, okay.
This is really annoying.
As far as I can work out,
it's 12.
It should be 1 a.m. on Tuesday in UK and 12 noon on Wednesday in Australia.
Yeah.
Does that look right to you?
Yeah, it probably is.
Mate, I find this shit so the last time I did an Old Commonwealth stream with people from Canada, UK, and Australia, trying to work out 3 time zones nearly did my head in, to be honest. But I think that's correct. The 0100 GMT, which is what the military calls Zulu time, so that it's the same everywhere.
Yeah,
because it's Greenwich Mean Time. That should be 1 a.m. Tuesday UK time and 12 noon Wednesday Eastern Australian time.
that looks correct. That looks correct.
Yeah, I thought I got it right, but yeah, I just wanted to double check it. But yeah, I'm going to be doing that with Don the Pleb. We may have some guests. I have invited people on my Discord, and I have invited people from 2 other Discords, including yours, George, if they've ever served in the armed forces. And if someone wants to come on, they'd be most welcome. Yeah, it should be interesting because, like I say, I was talking to Don about this, and Don reckons we can do 2 hours on this easy, and then we can probably do another hour or 2 on my channel afterwards about why the Western elites think it's a good idea. I have my own theory on this. And it comes back to what we've been talking about on here, George, that, they don't want strong Western men because strong Western men will make their tan, beige, boring, everyone is the same world harder to do because we won't like it. And I think that's really what it comes down to, despite the fact that it's obviously bad for the military. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against women being in the military. I'm against women being in the front line of the military. Women doing support functions on land for the Royal Navy, like the Wrens, great. Women doing support functions on land, on the ground for the RAF, like the RAFs, no problem with that. Queen Alexander's nursing corps, all that kind of stuff. I got no problem with any of those people. But they should not be on Royal Navy warships. And they should, in very large numbers as they are now, and they should not be in any of the T farms of the army. So they shouldn't be in the infantry or any infantry-related group like the Paras or the Marines or the Special Forces. They shouldn't be in the armored regiments, the tanker guys. They shouldn't be in the artillery. They shouldn't be in the engineers. They shouldn't be in any of those groups as frontline people. Like when I was in the army, we had 1 woman in my battalion, and she was attached to the battalion as a medical officer. Got no problem with that. That's fine. She used to occasionally get you to drop your pants and cough. But anything else, no, they shouldn't be there because I know the American US Marine Corps has done loads of stuff on this, and the British Army did too. They did a load of tests in the 1990s, I think, when they had all male sections, they had mixed sections, and they had all female sections. And the all male sections always won very, very, very easily. And then they did the same thing with platoons. Now, for anyone who's a civilian, a section is like maybe 8 blokes, whereas a platoon is like 30 blokes roughly. And they did the same thing with platoons. They had all male platoons, all female platoons, and mixed platoons. And the all male platoons, once again, vastly outperformed the other two, as you would expect if you had the least degree of common sense. And my son is a serving officer in the Royal Navy, and he tells me that many officers, not just himself, and also many senior petty officers who are the NCOs of the Royal Navy, they're the senior non-commissioned officers, all turn around and say the same thing, that there are too many women on Royal Navy warships today and they can't do damage control. So they're like, if you're hit in a war on a Royal Navy warship, whether it be by a shell or a torpedo or a missile or whatever it might be, the difference between your ship sinking and a lot of men dying and surviving is doing damage control so it don't bloody well sink. Or that if there's a fire, putting the fire out, which amounts to the same thing, because eventually a big fire will sink you. And women just can't do that. They're no good at it. You put them down into little spaces with thousands of gallons of cold seawater coming in and no way out, and basically they want to sit in the corner and cry. And they even do that on Royal Navy. The Royal Navy has these enormously expensive, I think they've got 2 of them, machines that simulate damage control. And they can't even do it there, let alone on a real warship. And I spoke about this to someone who is a quite well-known Royal Navy historian, who writes serious books and knows a lot of senior Royal Navy officers. And once he got rid of all his feminist nonsense, and he has a lot of that, by the way, as so many modern people do, he said, well, it don't really matter because the missiles that are going to hit ships these days are so big, they won't be able to save themselves anyway. That was honestly what he said in the end. That was his excuse. So, yeah, all right, they can all drown together then. No worries. And I'm sorry, I just think this is crap. And like I was in the British Army. I served in the SADF a bit as well in South Africa. And yeah, anyone who has served in the military will tell you, I think without exception, that women in the tea farms of the military are a very, very bad idea. And just make the military crap. Because the only way, like, for example, even in an ordinary infantry regiment, the only way you can take women in an ordinary infantry regiment is by lowering the physical standards. If you keep them up to the standards that used to be normal in, say, the 1990s, women just won't pass. So what they do is they lower them, which means, of course, not only do you get the women coming in, but you also get men coming in who wouldn't either. Because what you mustn't do is have separate things for women and men, even though women and men are very different people. Baron Badger, women are in the infantry now. Yes, they are. And our infantry, when they get into a war, are going to get our ass kicked when we fight someone who doesn't have women in their infantry. It's just ridiculous. You have cases where British training NCOs have sworn at women because they were doing something fucking ridiculous in a training situation. And it got onto the mainstream media because these girls started crying. Now, I tell me this, guys. Tell me if I'm really dumb. But if a woman starts crying because a training corporal comes up and starts swearing at her for being a twat, what chance does she stand when the brains of her oppo are splashed all over her face and machine guns are going off and there's explosions? She started crying because someone swore at her. Like, this is just insanity. And anyway, that's what Don and myself are going to be talking about, and maybe some guests. And just pointing out the ridiculous nonsense of this too. Baron Badger in the chat. Now, that's an interesting one. He's saying one woman is entering the Gurkhas now too. Well, look, I have the son of a Gurkha Rifles officer on my Discord. And I will ask him about that. And if it's true, I'll try and, I mean, I want him to come on anyway, but I'll try and get him to come on and talk about that. Because, like, the idea of a woman in the Gurkhas, are you talking about a English woman rather than the Gurkha woman, by the way, mate? Could I ask? Because I don't think it will be a Gurkha woman, because the Gurkhas tests are crazy shit that most Western blokes wouldn't pass. In fact, vast majority of Western blokes wouldn't pass. So you're probably talking about a Western woman, and I've certainly seen Western women officers marching with some units of the Gurkhas, but what they were doing, I have no idea. Hopefully not commanding them, because how would you respect them? You're not a Nepali woman, Baron Badger, so get fucked. So apart from that, yeah. All right, George, you got any final points?
Not really. I've put my Discord in the chat if people want to join it.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. Thanks, man. Yeah, carry on.
People are free to do so if they want to. They're free to not do so if they don't want to. It's not a big important active server by any means. But if you want to talk to me or some of the people who I like, it's probably a good place to get in contact with me. Apart from that, I hope you guys have a good weekend. Try not to get too depressed about the world, because sometimes the stream just makes me really depressed.
Yeah.
So apart from that, enjoy yourselves, and yeah, have a good tomorrow and next week. Yeah.
I would just say, stand tall, Canadian truckers, and all the people supporting the Canadian truckers. Don't give in to this wank Trudeau. Someone asked me a long time ago, how did they get into my Discord? My Discord is a closed Discord, dudes. Like, you have to get invited. One of the people who can invite you is George. I think there are 3 people who can invite people in my Discord, and that's me, Adaman, and George. So,
but I'm not. Yeah, I'm just going to say,
mate, I'm not going to stop you inviting anyone.
No. But like, if you guys want me to invite you, I will want to have had at least one conversation with you beforehand.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's absolutely cool. Look, I'm not against expanding the Discord a bit. Like, I think we got like maybe, I don't know, 28, 30 people at the moment. I don't mind if it goes up to 50 or so, but I don't want it to get much bigger than that. But if someone asks you if they can join, and yeah, speak to me, and all I'll do is I'll say to them, well, what do you believe, mate?
Yeah.
That's my main deal. But yeah, it's a closed Discord, but yeah, people can join it. They just need to ask. And like, you can find me on Discord and DM me. Go for it. And as I said, George can invite people, and so can Outman as well. So, there you go. All right, guys, I'm going to do what I usually do. We've gone a bit long this week, actually. I thought this was going to be a short stream. But I'm going to play us out with tune.
All right. Cheerio, mate. I'll see you when I see you.
Go on, man. Let me try that again.
They was our boatswain, a very merry boy, for no one half so merrily could pipe all hands ahoy. And when unto his summons we did not well attend, no lad then he more merrily could handle the ropes end. Could handle the ropes end. Could handle the ropes end. Singing. Chip chow, cherry chow, follow riddle little low. Chip chow, cherry chow, follow roddle day. chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-riddle-little-ow, chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-roddle-day. While sailing once our captain, who was a jolly dog, served out to all the company a double whack of grog. Then backstay he got tipsy, all to his heart's content, and he being half seas over, boys, right overboard he went. Right overboard he went. Right overboard he went.
Singing.
Chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-riddle-little-ow, chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-roddle-day. Chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-riddle-little-ow, chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-roddle-day. A shark was on the starboard bow, and sharks no man can stand, for they do grapple everything, just like them sharks on land. We've been out some tackling to give his life some hope, but as the shark bit off his head, he couldn't see the rope. He couldn't see the rope. He couldn't see the rope.
Singing.
Chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-riddle-little-ow, chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-roddle-day. Chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-riddle-little-ow, chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-roddle-day. Without a head his ghost appeared all on the briny lake. He piped all hands ahoy and cried, lads, warning by me take. By drinking grog I lost me life, and you my fate could meet. So never mix your rum, lads, but always take it neat. But always take it neat. But always take it neat.
Singing.
Chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-riddle-little-ow, chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-roddle-day. Chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-riddle-little-ow, chip chow, cherry chow, fall-a-roddle-day.
Okay, that was Ben Backstay. And I'm not entirely sure if that is really a Royal Navy tune or a British Merchant Navy tune, but one or the other. I'll just say to Dostastic Draco in the chat, I'm not founding a secular religion. My religion when I was a young man was the British Army and the British people. It's changed a bit. The British Army has become so crap and so small lately that it's less that these days. Still the British people though. So yeah. So anyway, guys, come and join me on Don the Plebs channel on Tuesday for what I hope will be an interesting stream, and then we'll probably have a second one on Thursday on my channel. And apart from that, go well. Check you later.